Welcome to the Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast, a podcast where we're seeking to lead change while also seeking to understand. We are also here as a platform for leaders to come together to unite, to develop and empower other leaders in the areas of business, family, and community. I'm your host, Lafayette Lane, joined by my co-host, John LeBron. Today, we are joined by our special guest, Herb Courtney. You know what time it is. Put those hands together, put those clap emojis in the comment section. Make Herb feel real good right here on the platform. He has joined us to have an amazing conversation on how to diversify and improve your hiring process. Just a little bit about Herb. Herb Courtney is the CEO of Renaissance Search and Consulting, a firm dedicated to connecting companies with the highest quality candidates from an extensive pool of diverse candidates with top-notch skills, experience, and work ethic. Herb has been involved within intercollegiate athletics for over 15 years, 7 of those years as Division I assistant coach. Before Herb's time in coaching, he was a very successful recruiter and sales manager for an IT recruiting firm. And Herb has a passion and background that makes him and his firm uniquely qualified to discuss how you can diversify and improve your hiring process. And today, he's right here on Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast. Herb, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for such a great introduction. So I appreciate that. You make me look good. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you all.
Man, we're happy to have you. Let's get right into the conversation, man. I'm excited about this because we've had topics about diversity before, but you deal in the sports arena. Mm-hmm. And of course, John and I, we love sports, of course, football, basketball. And so I'm excited to kind of delve in that area because I think it's kind of talked about, but not probably as much as it should be when it comes to diversity. And there's a whole plethora of areas that we can deal with when it comes to the leadership in the sports arena. The first question I want to ask you is, what do you think is lacking in the sports world concerning diversity? What are some things that you see that's lacking in the sports world concerning diversity?
Well, I think athletics in general, we kind of rely on just because it is athletics and they think it's an attractive industry and everybody wants to work there. So I think it's a little lax in terms of the hiring practices, right? And so, I think in athletics, they rely a lot on social networks, so if the decision maker and an AD or whoever wants is looking to hire someone, they might call their friend or they might or someone who's kind of very closely connected with them, and usually that's going to be someone who's the same age, probably same race, right? So it's not it doesn't yield diversity, so we could do a better job of that. Another thing is a lot of the times institutions will just post jobs on maybe this or HR portal, or sometimes the jobs aren't even posted at all, right? So I think number one is job descriptions and making sure that there's not a lot of bias in there, and then two, where are we posting these jobs? Are we posting it in different networks to attract more diverse individuals? And I think we just can't rely on say, hey, this is who we are, or this is the job, and whoever comes and applies, that's who we're gonna kind of select from. So I think we just have to be a little bit more intentional on how we kind of find our candidates, and that's where we come into play at Renaissance. Is we will help institutions and organizations kind of identify diverse talent and that fits their culture and what they're looking for, and you don't have to sacrifice that to have diversity. And I think you just got to know where to look and making sure that you are advertising your jobs in places where people can see it.
You said that's something that you guys do at Renaissance. What are some of those like specific things that other companies can glean from that you guys have found success in doing that they can incorporate in their hiring process? And I know you deal with talent acquisition, diversity acquisition of things of that nature. What are some specific things that companies can do to diversify their hiring process?
Yeah, I think there's little wins that you can have in terms of trying to acquire diverse talent. And what I mean by that is, I always say, within your own organization, I hope there's some diversity within that organization. And, using your own employees, especially diverse employees, to tap into their networks, right? And I think that sometimes gets overlooked, right? But number one, you need to understand what their experience is within that organization, as a diverse individual, right? And um, if there's issues there, they're not going to be speaking great on your behalf, right?
Right.
About the organization. So I think number one is having that understanding, and then two, using them, right, to be able to create more diversity within your own organization through referrals and employee resource groups. So I think that's one. Two is identifying certain networks that you can lean in and tap into, right? So it could be skill set specific. It could be, there's different trade organizations where you can create partnerships with. I know it's been a trend recently is creating partnerships with different diverse organizations, maybe like HBCUs or, some other, diverse networks as well. So there's a lot of different things that you can pull from to create that diversity and being more intentional. That doesn't take um, a lot of time, right? You just
Right.
have to be a little bit more intentional. And some other organizations might be, the Black MBAs, right? Or there's different, fraternities or sororities at the college level that you can pull from, and those usually have tons of, just variety of ethnicities, right, where you can pull from. So there's just different things that you can do. You just got to be a little bit more intentional in working with HR to do that. And I think HR departments are, um, you know, most of them are overworked and they have a ton of positions and things like that they're trying to fill. But I'm sure some of them do have those relationships where they can pull from, and especially if there's pipelining and things like that where you can create kind of that diverse pipeline of individuals for opportunities in the future.
So, and I have my own thoughts on this. So, but I think it's a pertinent question just for somebody to consider, and I think you could answer it. And it's pretty simple. Just why should a company focus, like from a company standpoint? I think sometimes they get so stuck on the track of just put the job description out there. We'll just, whatever has the best resume, we will hire that person, right? But that doesn't mean it's the best person for the company, for the culture of the company, for the direction of the culture of the company. So why should a company focus in their hiring practices or put a system in their hiring practices to focus on building diverse teams?
Yeah, I mean, I know you could probably go a couple ways with this question, but I think one is just the benefit of diversity, right?
Yeah.
It leads to, teams are more productive, more innovative, make more money, right? So I think sometimes organizations or firms view it as a social responsibility, but it's a financial responsibility that they really need to look at it through that lens. Because if you're looking at this through a business case, it makes way more sense to have a diverse team than non-diverse, right?
Yeah.
And I think when you can kind of put it in dollars and a monetary gain and how it's advantageous for that firm or organization to have a diverse team, then it's a little different. And then, secondly, when they understand the importance of it, it's also for it to really stick within an organization has to be a part of that the fabric, right? It just can't be, hey, we're just going to hire a few people of color or women and then check the box and we're going to go.
I'm so glad you said
right?
that. Yeah.
It has to be from the top down important, and recognizing, yes, diversity is important, inclusion is important, and you want to give the best experience to your employees, right? Because you can hire all of the diverse talent you want, but if you don't have an inclusive culture, they're going to leave in 6 months anyway, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going to be stuck. It's going to be a revolving door. So it really has to be in being inclusive and being equitable, and having valuing diversity has to be a part of that organization, and has to touch not just talent acquisition, but it's got to touch communications and how you market your brand and your company, and the messaging, and what does the pictures and your website look like? Is it inclusive? Do you have
Mm.
people from all different cultures and backgrounds on there? Do people feel like they can be a part of that brand or organization, right, when they're just looking at it? And a lot of the times, no, that's not the case.
Hmm.
Like, organizations will say, yes, we are, but you look at their website, you look at their executive team, you look at everything else, and it's not very diverse, right? So you can really kind of pick apart, if this is really a core fun, piece of that company. So I think it starts with that, and then it will just trickle throughout, right? And to really value the importance of diversity and how it is, not just like I said, just a great a social thing to do, but it's also a financial responsibility you have for your own organization and external shareholders as well.
It is a good social thing, but I think companies are really hurting themselves by not diversifying the their hiring process. And like, yes, it is a good social cause to do, but if they would just look at what they're missing, like the innovation and all these
Hmm.
things that they're not considering, like they don't even have to consider the social cause, and they would be behooving themselves to create a diverse company with different backgrounds, different upbringings, different views on the world. Like especially if you're creating products and services
Yeah.
that you're offering to people, there's got to be so many perspectives that you can't possibly consider because you can't have someone else's perspective, right? I didn't
Right.
grow up same as Lafayette. He didn't grow up the same as me. I used to work at an auto software company, and it was somebody would say it was diverse. It was like 99.9% white. I mean, like it was like the opposite.
Yeah.
But what they would do is say, well, we have our hiring process. I mean, it's a good company. Don't get me wrong, but their hiring process was we take a test, and then based on test results, that's who comes in to the company. Okay, but the problem then I said was like, okay, well that means that you're not even having enough people from other backgrounds take your test, right?
Yeah. Right.
It's not like only white folks are smart enough to pass your test, right? It can't be the case. So it has to go down to who are the applicants, and they obviously weren't targeting the enough people from other backgrounds for the application process. And I think about, were they innovative? If products, yes, but imagine how far ahead of competition they could be if
Hmm.
they actually do what you're talking about and make that an inclusive part of their hiring process. Websites, communication, making sure all that when you have, this company's big, they have 2,000 to 3,000 employees. So you think about all the different departments, right? How do you make sure every department is also part of that inclusivity
Yeah.
and the hiring process and so forth? I get it's a lot of work to do, but imagine how much further ahead they would be from competition just based on all the perspectives that would be included in that company. And I love what you said about the inclusion. Can I take a step back? You mentioned a job description bias. Can you
Yeah.
can you unpack that? I kind of like put a star next to that.
Yeah. I mean, I just think there's just certain things, within job descriptions that, just eliminates, people just from, number one, just from language, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
not, them not feeling inclusive. And then, a lot of the times, especially when I'm working with, especially more on the corporate side of things, but, it could be a manager position, and they said you need a, a, an MBA degree. And then I'm like, well, why? Right? Like,
Yeah.
if if this is the job and these are the skills needed, how does having an MBA a requirement for this job? And when you kind
Mm.
of push back on it, then they're like, "Well, you're right. Well, we actually don't probably don't need it." Well, if you probably need, you shouldn't have it in there. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Because you're just eliminating a whole bunch of applicants that, that can do the job, but
Could
maybe
be
don't
amazing.
have a grad degree, or,
right.
can someone with an associate's degree, but, they've been working in this industry for 5, 6, 7 years of experience and doing it at a high level. You tell me they couldn't do this job either. So I
Mhm,
think it's kind of
mhm.
unpacking that and kind of opening their eyes to saying, hey, I understand you want to have someone who's great, but you can have someone who's great that has an associate's degree or just a bachelor's degree. You don't need to have a master's or some other type of credential to do this job. And so I think, it's our responsibility and my job as, a search consultant to let them know that, right? And
For
I think
sure.
a lot of them are open to that, and they're like, wow, I didn't really think about that, right?
Mm,
And it does open the pool. It does bring in more diversity, and at the end of the day, I think that candidate pool, the 4 or 5 candidates that we hone on in, will be way stronger than having the person with the masters, or some other
mhm.
type of credential that's not needed for the job.
So they're thinking if I filter this deeper, then
Hmm.
it'll give me more of fewer sort of top of the cream of the crop applicants. And you're saying no, you're actually restricting yourself from a larger pool of potentially amazing applicants for a
Right.
smaller pool, which there could be good applicants in there, but you're literally just
Yeah.
taking the pool of applicants and filtering
Yeah.
it down.
Absolutely.
Interesting. That's great.
What role does leadership, representation, and leadership play in the hiring process? Now, again, I want our audience to understand that you are in the sports field, you're in the sports arena, and so we've seen things like the NFL come up with the Rooney Rule that
Hmm.
has been in effect since 2003. Now it's so 18 years, and yet and still we don't really have that many African American head coaches. We have a lot of assistant coaches or specialty coaches, and let alone African American owners. And so I think that a part of the systemic problem is that there are a lot of ownership that does not understand a lot of the quote unquote workers that are working for them.
Mhm.
And so yet the hiring process is there's a disconnect between the
Hmm.
top and those that are underneath because a lot of the ownership is not diversified.
Right.
How important, I'm sure you've seen that firsthand, how important that is to have diversity when it comes to the actual ownership.
Yeah. I mean, it is huge. And obviously, ownership or the president level in
Mm,
college athletics, it isn't very diverse. And I mean, that's just a fact, right? And I think the kind of the challenges, sometimes is making sure that they understand, or they have a opening up their networks, right,
mm,
to individuals of diverse backgrounds, and making sure they get to know them, right? Because I think sometimes, especially black coaches, or NFL coaches, they don't have access to that level, right? So if we can be more intentional in giving them more exposure to the owners and presidents, then I think they have more of a shot of getting some of those opportunities. And I do think the Rooney Rule, and it's good and bad, right? Because I do
mhm,
see the benefit of it. I do think it's great that coaches are getting experience interviewing and making sure that they're prepared and going through that process. And there is something to that, but if they never get hired, then
right,
it's kind of all for nothing, right? So I think
right.
um obviously with more social pressure, right? In terms of fans and players wanting to see more um, um, diversity at that level, both on the professional and collegiate level, is going to help. I think partnerships, right, where
Mm,
the bigger brands that support each entity in professional, sports like football and NBA and college, but more pressure that their kind of brand or the partnerships like a Coke or something like that puts on them. It's going to help drive that. But at the end of the day, when coaches do have the opportunities, is making sure that they're successful and giving them all the resources that they can to run a great program or team, so there can be more, right? So there's more success stories out there, and saying, hey, when given opportunities, they've been very successful. So I do think, it's a slow race, and we're, do we want to be further along? Absolutely. And like I've always said, especially since the murder of George Floyd, and there's been this super hyper focus awareness on diversity and inclusion, which is great. But I hope it's just not a moment of time, right? Where, in college sports this year, in college men's and women's college basketball, I mean, I can't remember the last time there were so many, people of color hired as coaches, right? And both on the men's and the women's side. And then, I just hope that trend continues, right? And that they're given opportunities, and just not a moment of time because of where we are in society, but that this will continue to play, and giving people opportunities that deserve it. We're not just handing unqualified people jobs. I mean, there's a ton of qualified coaches and administrators that deserve opportunities that just don't get it. And it's time that they start having their fair shakes at good jobs.
I think the other side of that opportunity, and I think that's great what you said, that was awesome. Not looking for a handout, but also, hey, if you're not going to give me an opportunity, I'll go build my own. Right. So hence we have the HBCUs. And I just think that yesterday we saw something incredible with Deion Sanders, right? Head coach of Jackson State University. He gets the number one recruit in the nation to flip from going to Florida State University, and the kid lives in Florida, right? To go to an HBCU program that some would suggest, why would you do that? They don't have as many resources and things like that. But I think it's moves like that, hey, if you're not going to let me in the door, I'll go create my own door, right?
Yeah.
How important is that? Because I believe you're an entrepreneur that started your own. Yeah. You didn't wait for somebody to give you opportunity, right? So those that are looking for, hey, man, if you're not going to pick up my resume, you see that I'm more than qualified for the job, I'll go build my own opportunity. I'll go build my own platform. How important is that aspect?
I mean, that is very important. And, and that was a historic move that we witnessed yesterday, right? Absolutely. And I think people will dismiss it, Deion, and it must be the NIL deal that he's going to get or whatever. But no, he worked his tail off to get Travis Hunter, the number one recruit in the nation, committed to Jackson State, right? And he sold his vision and created a path for him where he felt comfortable to commit to Jackson State. And and Deion, that was amazing to see, right? And I just completed the search at Grambling State. We hired Hugh Jackson, right? Two-time, football head football coach at NFL. Only black. Yeah, he was coach at the Browns and the Raiders, and then but he was a longtime assistant with Cincinnati, and so to be able to attract those caliber of professionals at the HBCU level is amazing, right? And I think this is going to continue to happen, and we need to celebrate that, because it is rich in history, and it is it's great sports, and we just need to embrace and celebrate that, and I'm just happy that now we have a platform to do that, and I hope more kids really consider a historically black college.
Yeah.
I think people don't realize the amount of work that someone like Dion had to put in moving. It's not like he just was hired a coach and snagged a player. Like he had a career, then he spent years building a brand. Obviously, he has his prime personality, and then he went to Jackson State and he had a success. Has it been 2 seasons now? I think.
Yes, I think
And he's helped turn the program. They've been doing well. I understand they're not ranked
11-1
top
this
10,
year.
but come on, they've been doing really
Yeah.
well. Yeah, I've been following it periodically,
Yeah.
and so he's not been. It's not like it's a slouch school that he's just kind of. It's because Dion's the coach. Like he turned the program around, and now you see what he's doing to make it even bigger. And now the name's going to get even larger, and people are going to pay attention for not just last year, but this year. And I have to assume that he's probably had even other offers at other schools having an 11-1 season that he must have turned down or just kind of dismissed, because as coaches have successful careers, we've seen it at University of Cincinnati. Coaches have successful careers, they go to a bigger school. Another UC has another big year this year. I don't know what's going to happen, but typically what happens is they leave. The University of Dayton here, they have a basketball program. Coach comes in, does really well. See ya. A couple
yeah. But that's the thing sometimes, especially with black coaches, you would think Dion would get tons of offers, but I'm sure he hasn't, because of, it's what people perceive as what you're getting, right? The bigger,
like
some of the personality and kind of what comes with it and all the media. And, I think an AD has to be very secure with him or herself to hire someone like Dion, right? And
he doesn't have a bad background. You know what I'm saying?
No.
Like he would be the ultimate promoter.
But he's not.
School.
He's not traditional.
Yes, I mean I get what you're saying. Yeah, he doesn't.
He's not a traditional coach
at a podium.
Nope. He's non-traditional, and some people don't like that, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. The example that just came to my mind was Cam Newton. Now, we know that he's been injured and things like that. He hasn't committed any crimes, but yet it's like this man is being blackballed because he comes with a hat and he has dreadlocks, things of that nature, and he's not the traditional. We know what traditional means. He's not the white quarterback that's went to the Ivy League school, so he's not a Tom Brady that comes to the podium all buttoned up and doesn't say the protocol, the PC things. That's an issue to systems, right? And so hence we have that systemic racism that, like you said about the Deion Sanders, that, hey, he's probably a better head coach than 90% of the coaches that you see, yet he will not get those opportunities on the next level because he's not fitting the mold.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think, I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but I predict a lot of the sports teams over time. You see, I'm starting to see it with baseball. I follow baseball. Is as teams come for sale, there's what do you want to call it? Like groups that are purchasing the sports team, right? So like tech companies and so forth are purchasing these baseball teams, and with that, you're starting to see baseball, which was super white for a long time. It's becoming more diverse each year, and it's becoming a lot more fun to watch. The popularity is at basically an all-time high. Personalities are infinitely more fun to watch now than they ever have been. The athletes at an all-time high level. And so baseball, which has always been boring for most people, is becoming fun to watch. Yeah. But I think part of that could be because you're starting to see the ownership changes. Because how many people can really afford to purchase the next?
Yeah.
When the Cowboys were bought, they were expensive, but they're not like they are now, because sports are at an all-time expensive thing. So these tech companies, these large other companies that are very progressive will be purchasing these teams going forward. And I don't know if that's going to be a trend or not, but I predict it could be, which I feel like has to have a positive impact on the ownership and the views of the ownership, being that a lot of these owners will be more progressive. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I just looked at or just saw something in my feed. It might have been on Twitter that LeBron was part of some group that purchased some team, and part of their portfolio now was the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was wearing a Penguins, jersey yesterday or something like that. And so, I think that definitely brings awareness and engages people that traditionally probably wouldn't care. Like now that I know LeBron is part owner of the Pittsburgh Penguins, I'm
Yes.
probably gonna pay attention to it a little bit.
Hockey, yeah.
Yeah,
Lafayette's getting ready to be a big hockey fan next week for the Columbus Blue Jackets.
so it's like, I'm not there's something that's never interested me. I mean, I did grow up in Buffalo, so the Sabres were right there, but I had no interest in hockey. But now, LeBron, who I like a lot as part owner, and now I'm interested a little bit. Same thing with, like you said, with some of the baseball teams and things of that nature. And so I do think that is a good thing for sports, and having athletes having minority stakes in some of these teams. I know Dwayne Wade has some ownership in some teams.
Utah Jazz.
Yes, the Utah Jazz. Yep. So which I think is great. I think it gives access, to ownership to to athletes, and it definitely helps with diversity of that. And I think they can bring ideas and new things, innovative ways to engage, right? And I think you saw that early with Magic when he was always, he got involved with the Dodgers and some other, so I mean that's great. And they used his likeness and were able to do some cool things to engage more fans. So I think that's a positive thing in sports.
What are some is there a characteristics or a way that a company can develop like a system? If a company saying, all right, we need to change how we do our hiring practice. I feel like they're like just saying we hired somebody or 5 people or whatever is short-term thinking. Like, how can someone develop an actual system to make sure their hiring processes are better?
Yeah, I mean, that is is obviously pretty comprehensive, and it takes some type of investment, right? Where you're probably going to need to loop in maybe a strategist, or someone who could really help implement and lay out what does that look like for you and your organization over the next 3-5 years, and how we're going to build that out, right? Because at a core, you need to understand where you are now, and then kind of plan to where you want to be, right? And then have some metrics in place to get the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. That's very important, and I think it takes a lot of time and planning and how you want to get there, whether that's through creating pipelines, internships, how are you hiring, what are your metrics in terms of where you are and who's kind of in your organization, and how you get there. So I just think that it just takes a lot of thought and intentionality. And if you look at a lot of the companies that have put statements out in terms of, hey, we're gonna hire 25% more of this or that, or people of color or women in leadership roles, and that all depends on your company, where you are, right? In terms of women of color, other ethnicities, LGBT plus communities, veterans. I think a lot of the times organizations just think of hiring more diverse, honestly, people of color or Black people right now because of this kind of the social, but it's so much more than that, right? It's diversity,
ages.
You just can't limit it just to one race, right? And I think we have to really be inclusive. We have to take accounts, all those different backgrounds and where you want to be. And I do think obviously people of color and women and the LGBTQ plus, and those are kind of tangible metrics that I think you can put together and see where you are and where you need to be. But it just has to be kind of well thought out. You need to know where you are, and then putting a plan, and then having outcomes, right? So you can measure that and hold hiring managers accountable, and kind of really all throughout the organization. And then obviously reward as well. You want to reward your organization for meeting those metrics, right? And I think if you do that, um, you know, it incentivizes the right behaviors.
Go ahead, Lucky.
I love that. I love that. Even though it's kind of crazy that we have to incentivize people to hire certain people. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But
yeah, but you know
yeah.
what? We incentivize for everything else too. We
Okay.
incentivize workers for getting a certain, trying to get clients or, hitting certain financial metrics, in the business world, or, people respond to incentives. It just, this is how it is. Right. And I think it's good to reward that. Right. And I do. I think it's good to reward what you're trying to have a desired outcome. I do think that as an organization, if it's felt in a way where it's authentic, right? And like I said, this kind of goes back to making sure D&I is a fabric of your organization and not just tied to hiring, right? It's got to be tied to everything within your organization, not just hiring.
Promotion
and I
through.
think absolutely, so if the organization does that, then I think incentivizing and rewarding people for the right things is good. Obviously, if it's just say, hey, we just need to hire some more diversity and that's it, then yeah, it's going to be met on deaf ears and it's not going to be very successful. Yeah, it's just, it does take an investment. You do have to probably retrain behaviors and identify things within the organization that could lead to employees not feeling inclusive or not having that psychological safety within your organization where they feel like they can't bring their best selves to work. But I think once you unpack that and people feel safe and they can they can bring their best selves, then I think you're moving toward that inclusive environment. And then yeah, I think you'll see a higher retention. People are going to be happier, and you're striving to that desired culture that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think the incentivizing would help create a more intentionality, right? Because I'm sure there's people out there who are like, I only want to hire this type of person. But there's probably a lot of people who just subconsciously don't put enough thought into it, enough intentional work into that. So I think the incentives would help for that.
Yeah, and then if you don't hit certain metrics or goals, you shouldn't be compensated, or maybe you don't get a bonus or whatever. Like there should be negative, penalties as well if you're not on board with it, right? Because you're not on the same path of the organization. So it should be both ways.
Gotcha.
It's a good point.
But they should obviously be attainable goals as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but if someone's not on board with the direction, I think you would see that in performance, and they would eventually filter out, right?
Yeah.
And then you can help change that. Super interesting.
Herb, can you give us one last piece of advice or whatever you feel in your heart that would be helpful to those that are listening? What if that's a strategy, whatever you feel, close us out, man.
No, thank you. My biggest thing is authenticity, right? So whatever you do, be authentic with it. I know, diversity, equity, inclusion is a hot topic and it's a buzzword and people are trying to get better, which is great. But I think number one is be aware, educate yourself, surround yourself with people that can help you through this and navigate, this kind of process of trying to be more intentional and building out your processes. And, you don't have to do it alone, but, don't do things that it's just to do it just because it's the flavor of the month today. Right. I think people can see right through that Like even for me, I don't work with clients that I feel that are just trying to check a box. You know what I mean? Like that's not what I'm here for, and I'm not going to place someone in an organization that that's like, hey, we're this is not what I signed up for, right?
Yes.
So so I'm really big on that, and I think people can see that and feel that. So no, so that's something that I feel very passionate about, and if it's not something that and then surround yourself with people that can help you, right? And it'll be way more impactful than trying to lead something that you don't have a passion for, or you don't really believe. So I rather you work with others that can help you through that, and not kind of fake your way through it.
Stay connected. Herb, you can do that several ways on Instagram at HTCII. You also can connect with him on LinkedIn, Herb Courtney. Check him out, connect with him there. Check out his company. He's doing amazing things. Stay connected here with us on Unscripted. We're at Unscripted Leadership on all social media platforms. You can check out our website, unscripted-leadership.com. Of course, our podcast is available wherever you get your podcast on all streaming platforms. Again, we say thank you to our amazing guest, Herb Courtney, for having this awesome conversation on how to diversify and improve your hiring process. And as I say to all of our Black excellence guests that come on our podcast, man, keep doing what you're doing. Keep showing that Black excellence. Keep making great happen. To our audience, we pray that you be the leader that God has called you to be. We're here to build bridges and not walls. Bridges connect, walls divide. Until next time.